find that the injury was consistent with the impact of one object the police found.
What was the object?
It was the capped end of a hiking staff.
I'm holding Exhibit 17. Is this the same hiking staff you examined?
Yes, that's the one. It has a perfect 2.25 centimeter diameter and is perfectly consistent with the bruise.
So, Doctor, what can you conclude about Parker Page's death on July 14th?
Given that Parker sustained a left clavicle injury that was consistent with the impact of that hiking staff before she fell to her death, I can rule out accidental causes. This was a homicide.
Thank you, Doctor. Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
All right.
Will counsel like me to take this away?
You can actually leave it up there. Thank you.
All right.
Cross-examination?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Dr. Quincy. You just told us on direct examination that you thought that Miss Page was hit with a hiking staff and fell backwards off of the trail. I want to talk about how that lines up with her injuries.
Sure.
If someone's hit in the chest with an object and they fall backwards, they could fall on their back.
That's possible, but in this case I believe that Parker was still alive after she was hit by the hiking staff, which means that when she was falling 40 feet, there would have been some flailing. So she
Doctor, if someone was hit in the chest...
Objection, Your Honor. I just asked that my witness be allowed to finish her answer.
Your Honor was outside of the scope of my question.
I'll give each of you a chance to respond.
Apologies, Your
What
Honor.
I was going to say was, it sounded like she'd answered the question and that was going on. I thought, as long as we're not cutting off the witness, let's try to keep it civil,
Yes, Your Honor.
but let's also make sure we're answering the question that's asked.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Doctor, if someone was hit in the chest and they fell backwards, they could land on their back.
Sure, that's possible.
You didn't find any injuries on Parker's back. All of her injuries were on her front.
No, she landed on her right side.
Well, doctor, if I was walking along and I tripped and I fell, I could fall on the front of my body.
Sure,
At that point, you'd expect to see injuries on the front of my body.
sure, yes.
All of Parker Page's injuries suggested that she had tripped and fallen off of that trail.
I believe that she was pushed off that trail by the hiking staff.
Well, doctor, all of these injuries, they were consistent with an accidental death.
No, actually, that was my initial conclusion, but upon receiving further evidence, I was able to eliminate that possibility and narrow down the conclusion.
Doctor, when you first looked at all of these injuries, you thought that they were consistent with an accidental death.
Yes, at that time.
Parker Page, she was more likely than the average person to suffer from an accidental fall.
Sure.
She had a disease known as osteogenesis imperfecta, or OI for short.
Yes, it's more commonly known as brittle bone disease.
That's right, that means that her bones, they weren't formed the same way as an average person's.
Yes, exactly.
She was more likely to get bruises and fractures than the average person.
That's correct.
She could get bruises and fractures just from minor physical impact.
Yes.
You also know that Parker had respiratory issues.
Yes, I believe she suffered from asthma.
That's right, she had asthma. She'd been diagnosed with several years with asthma.
Yes.
You know that when people don't get enough air in their lungs, that can affect the way their brain works.
Yes, sure.
So if a person with asthma isn't getting enough air in their lungs, they can become dizzy.
Sure, that's possible.
They can become disoriented.
Sure.
Doctor, they could trip, they could pass out and fall.
Theoretically, sure, but I don't believe that's what happened in this case.
Well, doctor, that would be an accidental death.
Yes.
Let's talk about how the police changed your initial conclusion. On July 16th, you sent a report to the police that said Parker's death could have been an accident.
I found at that time that Parker's death was consistent with either an accident or a homicide.
At that point, Detective Chesney came into your office.
Yes, so the detective came by to drop off further evidence.
He didn't ask if Parker's OI could have caused her to trip and fall accidentally.
No.
He didn't ask if her asthma could have caused her to trip and fall accidentally.
No.
Instead, he asked you to connect injuries on Parker Page's body with evidence that he found in Jordan Ryder's tent.
He asked me if any of the objects were consistent with the injuries.
He only provided you 3 items, ma'am.
Yes, it was the square end of a shovel, a multi-tool, and the hiking staff that I was talking about earlier.
Out of the entire campground, he only provided you 3 physical items.
Yes,
You know each and every single one of those physical items was found in Jordan Ryder's tent.
yes, I believe that's where they were found.
Doctor, let's talk about one of those items, this hiking staff.
Sure.
And you told us that you thought that this hiking staff was consistent with the bruising because the shape and the size were similar.
Actually, they matched down to the 10th of a millimeter.
Well, if I had another object that was a circle and measured 2.25 centimeters in diameter, it'd be consistent with that bruise as well.
Sure.
Doctor, you don't know if there were any items on the campground that matched those descriptions.
No, I don't know. I was going with the evidence that the police gave me.
That's right, you went with the evidence that the detective chose to give you.
Yes, of course.
Finally, doctor, you don't know when Parker Page got this bruise.
I know that it was before she died.
Well, you can't put an exact time stamp on it.
No.
She could have gotten this injury in a completely separate event than what caused her fall.
Sure, that's possible. But I believe that it had to have been shortly before, because it was either peri-mortem or ante-mortem. Additionally, it accompanied an underlying fracture, so Parker would have had to have been walking around with a broken clavicle.
But doctor, that's a yes, she could have gotten this injury in a separate event than what caused her fall.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Quincy. I have nothing further.
All right, does that prompt any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, before we begin, let's bring Ms. Ryder back. And sir, you may begin.
Dr. Quincy, you were asked some questions about where Parker Page's injuries were. Now, when someone's falling off a cliff, is it possible for their body to turn in the air?
Yes, absolutely. And I believe Parker was still alive at the time she was falling, and so she would have been flailing significantly. In other words, just because she was pushed backwards doesn't mean she would have landed on her back.
And doctor, why is it unlikely that Parker's death was an accident?
Well, I was able to rule out an accidental cause because of the fact that it matched the hiking staff perfectly, down to the 10th of a millimeter.
In your experience as the medical examiner, how common is it for an object to match an injury that closely?
It almost never happens.
Thank you, doctor. Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Thank you, doctor.
And the prosecution rests our case in chief and requests 5 to 7 minutes before defense case.
Let's do 5 minutes.
All right.